Right now, somewhere in your body, a decision is being made that you had no say in. In 2010, researchers pulled data from over 1.3 million people across 16 studies, published in the journal Sleep, and found something most people don't expect. It's not just short sleep that raises your risk of dying earlier. Long sleep does too. Both ends of the spectrum, quietly working against you at the same time. So if you think 8 hours is just the rule everyone needs to hit, a kind of universal biological law, that's not quite what the data says. Your temperature is dropping half a degree right now. Your cortisol is queued up, waiting for its cue. And depending on how last night actually went, not how you remember it, how it actually went, your body just ran a program it's been running every single night of your life, one you've never once seen the source code for. Here's the thing, you've felt this. The groggy Tuesday that made no sense. The 2 a.m. where you were suddenly, uselessly awake. The Sunday you spent catching up, like sleep were a bill you could pay late. You felt all of it. What you probably haven't done is connect it to a mechanism, an actual, named, measurable process happening inside you on a schedule you never agreed to. So let's start with the part almost nobody tells you. Your sleep pattern isn't a habit. It's a nightly instruction set. It shapes inflammation, hormone regulation, how your brain clears its own metabolic waste, and over decades, it shows up in mortality data. Researchers who've tracked hundreds of thousands of people for years keep finding the same shape when they plot sleep duration against risk of death from any cause. A U. Too little is a risk, too much is a risk, and the exact middle is quieter than either extreme, though not as simple as people pretend. Let's go there first to the short end, because that's where the illusion is strongest. Under 5 hours chronically, and your body stops treating sleep loss as an event and starts treating it as your new baseline. Here's what's actually happening. Your sympathetic nervous system, the go system, stays partially switched on. Cortisol, which is supposed to rise gently before you wake, starts riding high most of the night. And here's the part that explains that specific wired but exhausted feeling. Your brain gets flooded with just enough alertness chemistry to mask how impaired you actually are. There's a well-known finding from sleep researchers who tested people restricted to about 4 to 5 hours a night. For 2 weeks straight, their reaction times and cognitive performance kept declining day after day, but their own self-rated sleepiness plateaued. They felt fine. They were not fine. That gap between how impaired you are and how impaired you feel is the single most dangerous part of chronic short sleep, because it's what lets you keep driving, keep deciding, keep believing the "I function on 4 hours" story. Underneath that story, immune function drops measurably, natural killer cell activity, the cells that handle early cancer surveillance, and viral defense falls off with just 1 night of severe restriction. Cellular aging markers shift too. There's research linking chronic short sleep to shorter telomeres, the protective caps on your DNA that shorten as cells age. None of this means a bad week ends you. It means your body is running its repair cycle on a fraction of its intended time, over and over, and the debt doesn't forgive itself just because you didn't notice it accruing. The strategic insight here isn't sleep more, because you already know that, and it hasn't worked. It's this: your body cannot tell the difference between "I'm choosing this" and "this is happening to me." Either way, it runs the same stress response, so the actual lever is protecting the front end of the night. The first sleep cycle carries the deepest slow-wave sleep, the part most responsible for physical repair. Protect that first 90 minutes like it's the only thing you're getting, because some nights it basically is. Now, let's move into the 5 to 6 hour zone, because this one is sneakier. It's the one that convinces the most people they're fine. This is sleep debt territory. And here's what's interesting about debt specifically. It's cumulative, and it doesn't reset on weekends the way you think it does. Research on catch-up sleep, sleeping in on Saturday and Sunday after a short week, shows it can restore some subjective alertness, but doesn't fully reverse the metabolic and cardiovascular strain that built up. One well-cited study found that a couple of nights of recovery sleep didn't correct insulin sensitivity that had been disrupted by the preceding short sleep week. Your pancreas, in other words, doesn't care that it's Saturday. Cardiovascular research into this range consistently finds elevated risk for hypertension and coronary events compared to 7-hour sleepers. Modest, associative, not a death sentence. but real. And this is the range where cognitive masking gets sophisticated. You're rested enough to function at work, sharp enough to hold a conversation, but subtly worse at the things that require sustained attention or emotional regulation, which, if you think about it, explains a specific kind of irritability that doesn't seem to have a cause. It has a cause. It's just accumulating quietly instead of announcing itself. The insight, 5 to 6 hours isn't a lifestyle, it's a loan. And the interest is metabolic. Your only job here is to stop treating the weekend as repayment and start treating consistency, even an unglamorous, boring 7 hours, as the actual debt relief. If this is starting to explain things you've felt but never had language for, stay with me, because it goes deeper the closer we get to your actual pattern. 6 to 7 hours, but inconsistent, different bedtimes, different wake times, weekday versus weekend drift. This is its own distinct world, and it's arguably the most common pattern among people who'd never describe themselves as bad sleepers. Researchers call the weekday-weekend mismatch social jet lag, and it's measured the same way actual jet lag is, in hours of circadian misalignment. And here's what's fascinating. Even a 2-hour social jet lag, which is incredibly common, has been associated in population studies with worse metabolic markers and higher body fat, independent of total sleep duration. It's not how much you slept, it's that your internal clock kept getting reset, like you'd flown to a different time zone twice a week, every week, for years. This is the flexibility trap. You feel like you're getting away with something because the total hours look almost fine on paper, but glucose regulation runs on circadian timing as much as on sleep amount, and irregular timing disrupts it in ways that a sleep tracker's hours slept number won't show you. Resilience erodes here too, quietly, not enough to name, just enough that stress recovers a little slower, mood dips a little harder, and you chalk it up to a bad week instead of a bad pattern. Your only job in this zone is almost embarrassingly simple, and almost nobody does it. Anchor your wake time, not your bedtime. Your circadian system responds more strongly to a consistent wake-up than a consistent bedtime, because morning light exposure is the primary signal that resets your master clock. Fix the wake time, and the rest of the system starts organizing itself around it. Then there's 7 to 8 hours, consistent. And I want to be honest with you about this one, because it's the pattern that gets the least interesting content made about it, precisely because it's correct. This is the repair zone. This is where glymphatic clearance, your brain's actual physical waste removal system, discovered to be dramatically more active during deep sleep, gets to run its full cycle, flushing metabolic byproducts, including proteins linked to neurodegenerative disease. This is where cortisol and growth hormone run their intended rhythm instead of a distorted one. Longitudinal studies tracking sleep for over a decade consistently find this range associated with the lowest all-cause mortality risk. But here's the twist almost nobody mentions. Being in the correct range doesn't mean you're exempt from the rest of your life. This is also the zone where complacency creeps in, where people assume good sleep duration cancels out poor sleep quality, alcohol before bed, or chronic stress that fragments sleep architecture, even when total hours look fine. Your only job here is not to optimize further. It's to protect what's already working from everything else you're layering on top of it. Now 8 to 9 hours. And this is where the data gets genuinely more complicated, because more sleep here doesn't necessarily mean more repair. Sometimes longer sleep is your body's honest signal that something's already straining it. Early stage illness, depression, chronic inflammation, and the extra hours are a symptom, not a solution. Epidemiological research into this range has to work hard to separate cause from consequence, and honestly, it often can't fully. Some studies find elevated mortality association here. Others find it disappears once you control for underlying health conditions. This is one of the places where I have to be straight with you. The research is genuinely unsettled, and anyone who tells you it isn't is oversimplifying. And there's a context layer worth naming here, because it changes everything about how these numbers should land for you specifically. A 25-year-old recovering from one rough week and a 60-year-old managing chronic stress are not running the same biology, even at identical hours. Sleep architecture itself shifts with age. Deep, slow-wave sleep declines naturally, which is part of why older adults often report lighter, more fragmented nights without anything being wrong. Stress load matters too. High cortisol from daytime stress bleeds into nighttime architecture, shortening deep sleep even when total hours look normal. So two people can report the same 7 hours and be running two entirely different internal programs. That's not a flaw in the research. It's the research being honest about the fact that your body is not a population average. It's you, specifically, with your specific history. Which brings us to 9+ hours, or heavily fragmented shift-based sleep, the far end of the U-curve. Here, depression, chronic illness, and pain disorders are major confounders. People who are sick often sleep more, and that's not the sleep hurting them. It's the illness driving both the sleep and the risk. But fragmented sleep, waking repeatedly through the night, even if total hours look adequate, carries its own distinct cardiovascular load, because every arousal is a small sympathetic nervous system activation, a small cortisol spike, repeated dozens of times a night in shift workers and people with untreated sleep apnea. The honesty the data demands here is this: it's rarely the hours themselves that are dangerous at this extreme. It's what the excessive or fragmented sleep is a symptom of. Your job, if this is your pattern, isn't to force fewer hours. It's to ask seriously what your body might be signaling that you haven't investigated yet. So here's where all of this actually resolves. There is no single correct number stamped on every body. Genetics, age, and health status all shift these ranges, and treating any of this as a rigid cage misses the point entirely. What the research actually agrees on, across every pattern we just walked through, is consistency. Your cardiovascular system, your glucose regulation, your immune surveillance, your brain's overnight cleaning crew, none of them care about your best night. They care about your average night, repeated reliably for years. That's the actual instruction set, not perfection, repetition. Your body already runs this repair process every single night, whether you help it or fight it. It doesn't need you to understand glymphatic clearance or cortisol rhythms to keep running. It just needs you to stop interrupting it long enough to finish the job. So tell me, how many hours are you actually getting most nights? Honestly, not the number you wish were true. And what's one thing you've noticed your own body does the day after a genuinely bad night? I'd actually love to know.